Hello there, YouTube crew. Today we're going to be looking at double features. And they're a thing that came about during the Great Depression, basically as a way to get audiences back into the theaters under a buy one ticket, get two movies.
It was at this moment that he knew.
The movie started up on me again. I don't have Jeremiah Johnson. I don't think it automatically plays from the menu, but if I had it here, we'd put that on this instead, but I guess you can watch Deliverance while I'm doing this. What began as a gimmick has grown into an art form all of its own. See, the best double features are movies that complement each other, even though their narrative and even styles seem to be contradictory, but their thematic and character exploration tend to overlap and complement each other. I'm not a big fan of premise double features such as White House Down and Olympus Has Fallen. I'm more of like a Rob Roy Quickly Down Under, something that doesn't seem like it should go together, but they really do. And for today, we're going to be looking at Jeremiah Johnson and Deliverance. Both films released in the same year and are kind of based on true events. Jeremiah Johnson is based on liver-eating Johnson, who did fight the Crow for years and was a renowned mountain man. That's pretty much where the stories match up. You know, beyond that, they're kind of different. And Deliverance apparently is based on a real event that happened with the author of the book's father, and I believe he wrote the screenplay as well. Although it's unclear how much of what's on film is what really happened. I bet a lot was changed, and I hope a lot was dramatized. But yeah, never really know. On the surface, these movies share being set in the mountains, having to do with survival, and kind of a general adoration towards nature. I mean, they were set in the early, they were filmed in the early 70s. So coming out of 50s and 60s and how bad conservation was at the time and how harmful pesticides and all this stuff was going on, you can kind of tell why there was a desire for these heavy nature movies. But other than that, their narratives and genres are very much different from each other. See, Jeremiah Johnson is a Western epic. So, you have all the trappings of, the dealing with natives and it being an epic. You have this long journey that spans years, decades, and of course you have at the center of it a legendary figure. It's also, to distinguish it from Deliverance, it's very clearly a central protagonist to it, whereas in Deliverance it's more of an ensemble piece with 4 main characters, and the genre is very much survival thriller. They do also share that the first halves of them are very laid back, kind of a hangout movie kind of feel to it, but the second half, starting with a very tragic event, gets very violent and pretty aggressive. Johnson goes on a journey from being a noob to a legendary mountain man.
Great hunter. Yes? Fine figure of a man, yes? Yes?
Yes.
And he starts off seeking isolation, but falls into being a family man. And just when he's comfortable with this, the U.S. military comes knocking on his door and basically pressures him into leading a rescue mission. And then they disregard his warnings and desecrate a Crow burial ground, which falls back onto Johnson himself. He returns home and finds his family slaughtered, and that starts his wrath against his enemies. The Deliverance crew, they decide to go up this mountain and canoe the river that's about to be dammed up. It'll eventually go disappearing into what will become a lake. Their interactions with locals early on, very clearly shows the cultural differences between them and that they might not know what they're getting into.
You don't know nothing.
Much of the conflict of the movie is actually driven by the differing personalities and views of the main four guys. Lewis and Drew represent the two majorly distinct perspectives, while easygoing Ed, he's that middle ground and ends up being the deciding vote between the two on a very difficult decision. The crew has a terrible situation thrust upon them, and they try to handle it as best they can, but certain decisions maybe put them into worse and worse predicaments, or may have saved their lives. But Jeremiah Johnson, that movie, it becomes about the brutal cycle of violence, and it's brought on by differing cultural perspectives and the respect of them. Eventually, through sheer force of will, Jeremiah Johnson regains that respect with the Crow, and peace is finally brought between them again. And since it is an epic, by the end of it, Jeremiah Johnson has gained this legendary status. Deliverance, because of its tighter focus, it takes place in the span of a week rather than decades. It has a lot more to verbalize about the cyclic nature of violence, and especially what's escalated by cultural differences, and of course how this stuff affects individuals. Let me read from my notes, make it a little easier on myself. Lewis devolves into paranoia, and it's hard to see whether or not it's fully justified or if it led to more trouble. Drew simply couldn't live with what they did, and Bobby, they just wanted it all buried and wanted to as quickly repress the events that occurred. Now Ed struggles to hold everybody together, and he doesn't fully succeed in that. And of course, when Lewis is put out of commission, it's his job to step up and be the protector. And what starts as an ensemble dwindles to focus mostly on his progression. And of course, the last scene that we get to see is his nightmare of what if the past reaches back out of the grave.
No!
Part of the paranoia in the second half of the film is built around the difficulty in distinguishing between these different hillbillies, and Ed may or may not have killed his attacker. It could have just been another hunter that was innocent of all the things that happened to them. Finally, both films explore societal obligation versus individual preservation, and all of our heroes get scarred by this conflict. Well, I hope you check it out as a double feature. Watch them back to back. Don't watch them, one day and then a couple days later. Watch them side by side. I think they're very interesting like that. And anyways, I'm the real deal. Hope you enjoyed watching some of Deliverance while I did this, and goodbye. And let me see how do words work.